Everhood was one of those indie RPGs that created a mold of its own, blending classic RPG conventions with an unconventional rhythm action combat system. Though the system kind of emerged from the same quirky existential school as Undertale and Omori, Everhood established its own identity by focused on music-driven battles where dodging and absorbing projectiles felt more like a dramatic rhythm game than traditional turn-based combat. Now, Everhood 2 arrives as a direct follow-up, expanding on the original standout features with more music, more visual flair, and an even more outlandish world. Right from the start, the sequel greets players with a quiz-like questionnaire that shapes certain aspects of the experience. After this, you're dropped into a surreal environment with little exposition, no dramatic backstory, or lengthy tutorial explaining who you are or what you're actually doing. If you've played the first game, you'll find this approach familiar. It's part of the series' charm to keep players guessing, letting you discover the rules of its universe at your own pace. From the start of this review, I should just say that a major selling point of Everhood 2 is its expanded soundtrack, featuring over 100 songs through various genres. From energetic rock to chill beats, each track typically pairs with a boss or enemy encounter, pushing the game's signature combat system front and center. Instead of selecting attack or defend, you dodge, jump, and slide away from waves of projectiles that pour down like musical notes. To counterattack, you absorb certain colored attacks, building up enough energy to strike back using an elemental that matches the enemy's vulnerability. This dynamic keeps the battles from feeling like a simple dodging exercise where you'll have to remain mindful of color choices and timing. Though Everhood 2's gameplay centers on fast-paced reflexes, it also sprinkles in light RPG elements. You'll move through surreal areas, interact with whimsical characters, and occasionally pick up items that influence your progression. The world design here is vague yet rarely confusing. Scenarios tend to flow logically despite their offbeat nature. In early stages, you might be fixing a broken gaming console or diving into its hardware chip, transforming a simple fetch quest into a bizarre mini-adventure. This loose structure can be refreshing, though it also means you won't find deep lore or detailed character backstories. The game's visuals take cues from the first Everhood. Overworld sections use retro pixel art and minimalist design, punctuated by odd bits of eye-catching detail. Battles, on the other hand, are a vivid spectacle of pulsing lights and color, and yes, the developers even included a photosensitivity warning for good reason. Even more than in its predecessor, Everhood 2 cranks the visual intensity up during music battles, which can feel like mesmerizing light shows, albeit one that demands your complete focus. While you won't find branching dialogue trees or emotionally charged arcs, you'll meet an eccentric roster of characters. Many serve as conduits to battle, but they still have the distinct quirks and memorable designs, lending each encounter a unique feel. The writing remains offbeat, with occasional meta humor and comedic moments. Those who enjoyed the original's brand of playful absurdity might feel right at home here. If you're concerned about the game's length, Everhood 2 isn't a sprawling RPG, but it isn't actually trying to be. Instead, it seems to be more about offering an eclectic selection of music-driven battles. With around 100 songs, the replay value is substantial for players who like chasing better results or mastering harder difficulty levels. There is also a pretty real learning curve here. The tutorial is minimal, and though you will receive some in-game tips, much of your progression will hinge on practice and pattern recognition. It echoes the first game's philosophy that discovery, both in terms of narrative and gameplay, is central to the experience. In many ways, Everhood 2 doubles down on what worked in the original, the idea of a rhythm RPG that focuses less on story beats and more on, well, literal beats. The projectiles that take shape of musical notes and the sense of wonder from the boss battles that you face are all components of the experience. If you're a fan of the more indie experimental games like Undertale, you'll likely appreciate the freedom Everhood 2 gives you to find your own way and interpret events at your own pace. That said, if you're looking for deep lore or typical RPG structure, you might find yourself adrift. Everhood 2 doesn't prioritize detailed plot threads or standard character progression. It's just more about fluid, fast-paced battles in a loosely connected dreamlike world. However, within the structure, it presents a surprisingly amount of variety. Enemies can have wildly different attack patterns, and some bosses even have unique mechanics like shielding themselves from absorbed attacks. Each new challenge requires you to adapt, sometimes on the fly, to change tempos or shifting the color combinations. The sense of style continues in the overworld interactions as well. One moment you're wandering through a forest full of smiling NPCs, and the next you're playing a metagame within a game that morphs into its own dimension. Unlike a linear RPG that spells out the plot, Everhood 2 sprinkles cryptic hints and one off comedic skits, leaving you to piece things together or to simply accept the chaos at face value. Visually and musically, this sequel retains the energy of its predecessor and amplifies it. The bullet hell meets rhythm action aesthetic is as distinctive as ever, with the developers leaning into the imaginative boss designs that align with each track's style. One boss might be all about precise bullet patterns set against a jazzy score, while another could hinge on color-coded beams you must absorb in time to a faster, techno-inspired soundtrack. All told, Everhood 2 is best approached as an experimental take on RPG mechanics, with its main emphasis on music-fueled combat encounters rather than a narrative-driven epic. If you enjoyed the first Everhood, or if you're drawn to offbeat titles that mix genres, you'll likely find plenty of reason to dive into this adventure. The gameplay is playful yet challenging, propelled by a sense of whimsical unpredictability that keeps you guessing at every turn. While the story might not dig deep into emotional territory, it doesn't actually need to. The kinetic battles and off-the-beat set pieces are the real heart of this experience. Everhood 2 builds on its predecessor's core strengths: quirky rhythmic gameplay, memorable boss battles, and a sense of unbridled creativity. It's a short but replayable foray into a surreal music-driven world where rapid reflexes, timing, and an open mind make all the difference. If you're looking for an unconventional mix of RPG elements and rhythm action, this sequel is worth a spin. Noisy Pixel is giving Everhood 2 a 7.5 out of 10. Thanks for watching. This video is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. Noisy Pixel is run by a group of gamers providing independent gaming coverage through news, reviews, previews, and more. Check out our Patreon to help support our continued growth, and subscribe to keep up with all our future content.
Noisy Pixel.